I have nothing much to say, actually. I'm moderating this session, and I asked each speaker to introduce themselves at the beginning of their presentation. So before me talking here, let's get to it. And Lee, you go first.
Oh, it does seem to work. My name is Lee Mwiti. I like to think I'm Chinese because the name Lee is actually derived from Chinese, right? I know it's a family name for Chinese families. And I came to be called Lee because around when I was born, many months ago, I'm turning around 40 now, my mom was a big fan of Bruce Lee, right? And he had just released a movie called Enter the Dragon. So that's all my mom could think of at the time, Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee. So I am Chinese in name and African, obviously, in background. I am the chief editor of Africa Check. So I'll probably give I think actually I can just get started right here, right? Yeah, in the time I have, I think just about 90 minutes. I'll try to go as quickly as I can. The introductions part, I did speak. We are a fact-checking organization that is headquartered in South Africa, but we have physical offices also in Kenya, in Nigeria, and in Senegal. And we tend to use this as a launching pad for the work that we do with other organizations around the continent. And Africa is not a small continent. We have about 55 countries. That is also fact-checkable because no one really knows how many countries are in Africa. So some years back, we did an article on how many countries are there in Africa. Some say 54, 55, 56. To this day, it remains the most widely read on our website. So just tells you just how, one, we're dealing with a monolith of a continent and how you cannot take a one-size-fits-all approach to what we do, right? So we turned 10 last year, and I did mention we have 4 country offices, but just to tell you our growth, when we started out, we were about 3-4 people in 2012, and now we are 45, and I think even more. I think we should be closing in on 50, so just tells you how much the practice of fact-checking has grown, as has been outlined by my colleagues who have spoken here this morning. Right, I think you've also heard a lot about the principles that we ascribe to. We are also an IFCN verified member, have been for quite a number of years, and you've heard of the key principles that govern organizations that fall under that. We are guided by 5 goals, and I think the last 2 are the ones I want to dwell on. One is we want to foster fact-checking skills and techniques among the wider public, and the young in particular, because we believe that gives us a better chance of sort of pushing back against the what can often feel like a tidal wave of misinformation, right? And I have a session tomorrow on media literacy, which I was saying is going to be actually the more interesting one. So I have come after a lot of very interesting presentations. I particularly liked the session that came just before this, the work that showcased the amazing and thriving work that fact-checking organizations are doing in Taiwan. I really was blown away. And I think I go away that much richer. And also, I think I might look to expand Africa Check. I think I had one organization was up for acquisition, right? So I think I'll speak to that organization that was looking for an investor. We would like to also expand our network to Taiwan, right? And also we work to foster a community of non-partisan fact-checkers, which is something I think those who might have been in the Global Facts last week noticed there's quite that trend where there's quite a lot of networking growing across the world, where organizations are looking to collaborate and share experiences, probably excluding the US. You did say there's a bit of competition going on there, Angie. Cool. Our funders, because we tend to be open in keeping with our ascription to IFCN give us quite a bit of grief when we are fact-checking. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was one difficult one, especially during the pandemic, because of all the sort of conspiracy theories that we saw flying around. But we've worked quite with a lot of organizations that have supported our work over the years. So I did speak that we have 4 physical offices, and we also look to, one, I think it's good to just give you a sense of the operations of how we do our work, so that then I can bring it home in terms of collaboration, right? So we have 4 physical offices. We have in Nairobi, in Dakar, in Johannesburg, in South Africa, and lastly in Lagos. And so we tend to have physical offices, and this then we tend to partner with credible institutions in those countries. So we tend to partner with universities. We tend to set up in universities because we think it gives us quite a lot of credibility when we are dealing with the kind of contested space that we find ourselves in as fact checkers. It also helps in terms of allowing us to decentralize, to understand the nature of misinformation on the continent. I did say after we are using this as launch pads, almost as strategies to understand the nature of misinformation around the continent, right? So local is better. If you're going to fact check, then you do not want to parachute into any country and claim to understand what is the nature of misinformation in any country. You want people who are situated in that country, who understand the historical, the socio-cultural context that, that operate in that country, and then fact check according to that. And then based on your experiences, you are then going to help, or rather foster, other fact-checking organizations to fact-check in the countries they are in, right? And anyway, it's impossible to be in 55 countries as one fact-checking organization. It really is a headache, a nightmare to speak of when you think of all the different laws that are in these countries. Whether it's labor laws, you have to pay attention to each labor law, whether it is access to information, whether it is media freedom, very different in each country that we are in. Even making cross-border payments is a monthly headache, right, that we have not mastered in almost 10, 11 years of fact-checking. But we like the fact that it gives us that understanding of the nature of disinformation, of misinformation in a different environment, right, in the global south, so to speak. So we have about 4 or 5 key ways that we use to partner, to collaborate across borders. And one is the Africa Facts Network. Almost 50, I think 52 organizations right now. I was impressed by the growth in that network in the last 2-3 years. It's really been amazing to see just how it's bloomed, yeah? It's actually exploded, not even bloomed. So I think I did not know we had this many fact-checking organizations on the continent, right? But yeah, so we convened this network, has been in operation since 2017, and we then look to sort of form a shared approach to the challenge of disinformation, of misinformation, or false information that we have to contend with on the continent of Africa. We do a lot of training also, whether of the media, of trainers, because again, we cannot do all this ourselves. We need to build a community of people who are focused on growing the practice of fact-checking, of building the resilience of the public to critically engage the information that they come across. We have fellowships, which is one I really like, where we put call-outs for people from around the continent who are interested in fact-checking to come through to our offices every year. We have now 2, we used to have 1, and we host about 12 fellows every year. We take them through the operations of our fact-checking organization from scratch, whether it is from standards, fundraising, the practice of fact-checking, as you've heard from my colleagues who outlined the methodology. So we take them through how you would run, or actually even how you'd set up an organization from scratch and run it, build it up. So that tends to be very interesting, and we've seen quite a lot of organizations that are growing from that sort of platform that we've built with fellows. And also we do a lot of research partnerships. I did speak that the challenge of disinformation needs to be understood according to the context you are in. So we partner a lot with institutions, especially universities, because we want to research how misinformation flows in the African context. So there's quite a lot of work we've done around that in the last 5-6 years. Right now we are working to see if we use influencers. We can then seed accurate information in the networks, right? And it's almost coming to fruition. We're taking a lot of learning lessons from that, but this allows us to experiment with as many approaches as we can, and also to then see, okay, so this is what we are seeing about how misinformation travels on the African continent. So then how can we approach the problem from an informed approach, right? So again, that means we do not want to just take solutions from other regions, say from the global north, and parachute or transplant them into our region. We want to grow our own sort of understanding about the problem, and then see if we can come up with new approaches, or maybe build on what others have done and try to, sort of, adapt them for the problem that we find that we are facing on the African continent. Sorry, I wanted to go back, yes. So nature of collaborations, I think it has been mentioned quite a lot in this morning, this afternoon rather, about the Africa. Actually, the FCN was quite big on this morning about the Africa Infodemic Response Alliance. Brought a lot of organizations, including ourselves, that then we've sought to take the same approach towards elections. And we have 3 initiatives currently. We just, from an election in Nigeria, we formed a coalition with a lot of fact-checking organizations. It's a very interesting experience because, again, you learn just how different fact-checking organizations really are, even if they are in the same continent. We were part of a key part of a collective last year in the Kenyan elections, known as the Fumbo Initiative, which also brought together players in the information ecosystem, including the media regulator in that country, to again tackle the general election in Kenya. We have an election coming up next year in South Africa. We are already seeing quite a problem of early disinformation. I always say with disinformation, you can almost anticipate it, right? So you again can take that teaching approach, because if you break down an election into different phases, you can understand what would be the nature of disinformation at a particular phase of an election, and then you can then say, I'm going to take a proactive approach, I'm going to create a lot of teaching materials around this phase of the election, right? So that also cuts your time when it comes to fact-checking in real time, when you actually get to have to do fact-checking in the heat of the moment. We also have set up a tool on our site called InfoFinder. So we realized one problem that we face on the continent is that of accurate data and access to that data, right? So then this takes 2 approach. This takes 2 prongs rather. We work with fact-checking organizations in different countries to give us accurate information around key topics that we have identified that a lot of our audiences on the continent have interest in, whether it's health, whether it's justice, whether it's social issues. Then we then bring that together under one tool, make sure also it's reader informed, so we take a lot of submissions from that, and then we can use that to say there's a lot of interest in this topic, let's create as much information as that. Access to data is always going to be an issue on the continent for various issues, whether historical issues, whether it's going to be literacy, or just access to data itself. Maybe data is a very expensive commodity on the African continent. In fact, if you think about it, it is the one really big determinant about how people are vulnerable to misinformation, access to data in terms of the cost of data. Someone said, actually, if you break down the problem of disinformation on the African continent, comes down to the megabyte, right? That how much can people afford, right? And then that informs a lot of the initiatives that you are going to use, because if you're going to say, I'm going to do media literacy, how much does it cost for that person in the rural area to access the information you are coming up with if you're trying to teach something, right? If it's graphics, if it's even radio, how much does it cost for that person to access that information, right? If a person has competing costs, food or data, then you have to actually think about that equation and say, I am going to make my work accessible in this format because it is much cheaper for the target person, the target audience, right? We do have a number of challenges, data gaps and accessibility, I did mention that. data is also very politicized on the African continent, at least in the African countries that we are in. We tend to find that, depends on who is asking, right? You'd think, for example, you have statistical institutions, national statistics organizations that should give you that data. Anyway, they're going to look at a lot of factors, when they give you, or rather allow you to access data. For example, you find that depending on who the head of that institution is, tends to have been appointed by one political party. They're not going to release information that is going to paint the government of the day in negative light, right? So data tends to be quite politicized. You'd expect it not to be, at least if it's a taxpayer-funded organization, but tends to be. Non-accountability, if you're looking to have impact in terms of having people who have made claims withdraw or at least acknowledge that they have made a lot of they made a lot of mistakes. Many countries just don't have that culture of taking accountability, So you have to figure out which is the best way to, flag that a person of wide reach or significant political person, for example, made a mistake. It's going to have negative repercussions if not corrected. How do you get them to correct, right? So there's a culture of non-accountability in a number of the countries that we work in, so you have to find a way of working around that. Bureaucracy also, just keeping with the culture of non-corrections. For example, just 2 of the African countries, the 4 African countries we work in, have an access to information law. But that also just tends to be on paper. In Kenya has been on paper, I think, has been there for almost 12 years, right? And we then used it to try to get data on how much road the previous government built during the time in office. That government was voted out last year. We were kicked from pillar to post in the search of that information. We've never gotten that information, right? And it's supposed to be accessible to us using that law. So you can have the laws on paper, but in practice, it's a different, completely different ballgame. Bureaucracy also, maybe it's an example I'll give tomorrow during media literacy, but if you're trying to, for example, include media literacy modules in the curriculum in high schools or even in primary schools, it's a mission because then, takes almost, 3, 4, 5 years to approve a curriculum change. So what does that mean? Then it means you are going to have to, for example, decentralize that approach and see if you can work with provinces. There's a problem with that. Again, it's not going to be uniform. It's going to be based on the interpretations of various players in the education system. So bureaucracy tends to be quite a big issue. There's a lot of red tape in the African countries that we work in. But I did want to narrow down to some of the lessons we've picked up. And one is to be, this keeps on jumping, but I'll bring it back. I'll force it to stay there, right? One is we want it to be, we want everything that we do to be audience-led, right? I wish someone could pause this for me. But anyway, we want everything to be audience-led. Okay, 2 minutes. Someone, anyway, I'll try to remember what I had in my head. We want everything to be audience-led, right? So we don't want to sit there as editors and say this is what we think is the most important thing for us to be collaborating, in terms of African countries, right? So an example is in South Africa, we get a lot of interest in working on climate change issues, right? But then again, if you look at all the surveys, if you look at all your reader submissions, if you look at what's covered, then you find that there are way more important issues, or rather way more everyday issues that people are more concerned with: crime, poverty, inequality, unemployment. And maybe then you ask, am I going to use my resources to focus on those areas, or maybe focus on the new areas that we have been asked to, we have been asked by, for example, by funders to spend some money on. Context, I did say, is invaluable. You want to understand all the countries. Radio is king in very many African countries. You cannot just ignore the role of radio, right? If you're going to get that reach offline, then it is very important to work with community radio stations, even better than TV, for example, even better than probably some of the new social media approaches that we see, right? So radio has that approach, right? So the question is, how are you going to make it inclusive of the audience, for example? And we've come up with a few interesting ways that maybe I'll speak to tomorrow in the interest of time. And I think the last one I do want to focus on, just to bring it home, I think also is about media literacy and just how it needs to be adapted for the various countries that you are in. But again, then you must realize that different constituencies have different media interpretations of media literacy, right? And I think that's why we're seeing a move, at least in the fact-checking industry, towards misinformation literacy and not just media literacy. Again, if you ask high schoolers, they'll be more interested maybe in knowing how to be safe, protect themselves from cyberbullying. If you speak to universities, maybe they want to speak to the theory of media, and how media affects society. Again, if you speak to fact checkers, we want to teach people a lot of technical skills. So again, it's a very interesting field, but I think media literacy gives us a bigger, I see you at 0-0. Media literacy gives us a bigger chance at pushing back at the tide of misinformation. I'll stop there.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. So how many countries are in African continent? 55?
I don't even know myself as an editor. We are 55, 56. Right?
All right, so from African continent, we move on to European continent. So Carlos, please.
Bad to come after Lee, because he's a very funny person. And I don't know if I can keep us entertaining talking about cross-border fact-checking and collaboration. But I'm going to try. And I'm going to start in something that is obvious for all of us. I get often called to talk about cross-border collaboration for fact-checking. And I always have tried to start convincing people how important it is. But I don't think in this room of all places I need to tell you about that. Like over here, let's not name it if we don't have to, but there is a clear disinformation vector and a lot of actors interested in addressing that vector, I could say, right? I am sure if I'm going really quickly, our translators can make me a gesture or something because I tend to do that. Okay. So let me just tell you a little bit about Maldita and what we have been doing in the field of international collaboration with this. And this will be easier if I use this. Yeah. So this is us. Well, this used to be us. It was a while ago. We don't fit in that place anymore. We are a Spanish fact-checking organization. We are located, obviously, in Southern Europe, but we have the benefit of speaking Spanish, which connects us very well with our friends in Latin America, which has been wonderful for us when it comes to transnational cooperation. And we really are believers in cooperation, maybe because we come from a country that is not that big, in Europe is not that rich, and it has always, helped us to kind of punch above our weight in doing fact checking. So all those people that you see in that picture, I am in the back because I am the tall guy who cannot stand any other way. All those people are somehow or have been somehow involved in some kind of international cooperation over the years, because we really see the value of contributing, but even more to learning about the cool stuff that other people is doing. And let me tell you, in this previous session, I have been blown away by some of the numbers and things that are being done in Taiwan. So, still today, I have been learning so much. So we do a bunch of different things. We have, only in editorial, we have, dedicated portals, websites, dedicated to disinformation about migration, feminism, food, climate, scams, data journalism, science journalism, tech, hoaxes. That thing that seems like an official building is what I do, which is public policy and institutional work, education. We have an academy unit, a projects unit. I am saying this not because I want to show off of the things we do, just to tell you what kind of a little hyperactive organization we are. So it was hard for us to kind of stay at the border, partly because we all know disinformation never stops at the border. And this has become more and more evident through the years, right? Like, I think most of our organizations, those of you who are into fact-checking, you probably start seeing the kind of local disinformation you get and think, oh, this is so smart, because for the Spanish audience, it goes here and there. But then you collaborate with our friends at Fatabyyano, for example, and you see, oh my God, there are different guys saying the same things in Arabic. And they, there is this YouTube video that YouTube never, seems to care to do something about it, where someone in Arabic is telling people, drop chemotherapy, eat more almonds, and this is exactly what is happening in Spain as well. And as you dig and dig and dig, you see other fact checkers in several parts in the world doing the same. And then you start digging a little bit more, and you see that actually not everything is about drop chemotherapy, eat more almonds, or UFOs do exist. And there is an actual intent by some international actors to push their agenda, to sometimes decimate their, other countries online, to, do their thing, do their interference. So as long as you, as you gain understanding, you realize how important it is for your organization, and has been for mine at least, to collaborate with others, right? So for us, everything obviously started with the IFCN Code of Principles, the International Fact-Checking Network, that kind of set a benchmark for all of us in telling us, these are very important things that you need to care about. Non-partisanship, clear methodology, honest corrections policy, all those things that should be, at the core of every fact-checking organization work. And also the IFCN through the years has given us places and spaces like the conference that we just have been, the Global Fact, to share our experience, because let's not kid ourselves, it's so nice to be in a room full of people that, cares about the same issues that you do. And for me, it was so nice to, see so many people here coming from Taiwan and facing the same kind of issues we have faced, and some of the ones that we see in the future and that we do not have, an answer with. The bit I just saw in this stage about finding credible prescriptors for media literacy or quality information through yoga instructors, all those things are things we need in Maldita to think about. So coming to these places has been very important. IFCN has been very important for that. Obviously, as I was saying, our colleagues in Latam Chequea, the South American network, has been so kind to us to allow us to be present in that, because we speak the same language as many other countries in South America, and not all of them. And they have been so kind to let us also learn from what they do. And obviously we had our own European thing that it's very recent in creation, but it's already doing a lot. As you're probably aware, Europeans, we have a thing for fighting each other, fighting everyone really around the world. Not proud of that. But in the last few decades, we have kind of learned to try to work together a little better, no? So the European Fact-Checking Standards Network has been, have become a necessity for many of our organizations when we realized that we had unique opportunities just of the damn luck of being in Europe. Like, for example, most of the stuff I do is actually pushing platforms to do better, because we all know massive online platforms are very, 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 very relevant when it comes to disinformation online. So they don't pay much attention to anyone, but I can tell you, a small fact-checking organization in Europe, they pay even less. But by gathering together many organizations in Europe, maybe we have a better chance. And also, since these big companies need access to markets to earn money, which is their primary driver, there are the biggest markets for them right now in terms of coordinated access to it are the European Union and the US. Not because the Asian market is not larger, it clearly is, but it's not, but there are different ways of approaching the Asian markets, while the European Union has a common market for many of these things. So we are trying to take advantage of the opportunity. And why the name here that we picked, and it wasn't by random choice, contains the word standards. Because we thought that it was very important that from the title of the organization itself, this had to be about standards. Like, we felt we are demanding, the public to trust us on a much higher degree than other media, for example. So we got to be ready to offer them more. So the first part of the exercise was to write a code of standards that could, set some standards that could maybe let the public think, okay, these guys are making an effort. Maybe I should trust them a little bit, right? So this is what we have been doing in the last days. Obviously, there are other cooperation that is not among organizations so much as to being about editorial projects. This for us was a very obvious thing that a lot of people has been doing around the world in election time, right? Just much smaller than, for example, Pablo's example about what they do in Argentina. But it is an initiative to gather media and fact checkers and do some common work around elections. So this, we quickly saw how this translated into a bigger audience for all of us, be able to have a quite wider scope, have more credibility, because maybe you don't trust every actor in this ecosystem, but if you trust a couple of them, you might say, well, this alliance about electoral disinformation might not be so bad, because these 2 or 3 brands that I trust are there, right? So it all started with editorial projects small like this, and then this happened, no need for an introduction, and it, I think, completely changed the way we work, not for Maldita, for most fact checkers around the world. And then it quickly became apparent that collaboration was no longer a choice. Like, we couldn't tend to all the things that we happened. So we all said, I guess, well, I have this set of organizations around the world that work under the same standards as me, because they are IFCN signatories. I trust them. Why I have to repeat exactly the same steps of every investigation when most of the content around COVID was plainly international? Like the people who said they were getting 5G into my vaccine, they said it for Jordan, and they said it for Africa, and they said it for everywhere else, right? Being here in Taiwan, sometimes I wish they had, because I had no connection anywhere. But other than that, the IFCN pushed this fight in the infodemic. Kudos to Cristina Tardaguila, who was, as I think Elaine was saying before, the fighting spirit behind that, to kind of, in a very basic form, put our content together and, just have broader repercussion, just to allow each of these organizations to, stand on the work of others, right? Many, some fact-checking organizations here in Taiwan have been contributing to that, and it's been very successful. So I think the pandemic, 8 minutes, that's not bad. The deadly pandemic was a terrible time for us, but we all got our lessons from that, on the personal level, on the professional level. For fact-checkers, I think there were 3 key lessons that were right on the spot, at least for my organization. Global events bring global disinformation. This was so true. Like, for months, we could go having disinformation that was basically the same in every country, with local tweaks, of course. But the basis was the same. Elites trying to exercise society control. There was one that was very popular about how effective oppressive regimes were in managing pandemics. You surely remember that, right? And there was a whole propaganda campaign about maybe we should live all in autocracies because they are so effective at managing pandemics. I don't think that's the prevalent judgment anymore, but it used to be for months, at least in Spain, where people was stuck at home for more than 2 months. There were, suddenly a lot of people who saw, the beautiness of some dictatorships. The second key aspect was trust before collaboration. And I say this to kind of push the idea that it's important to have networks and to have systems of trust before crisis hits, because it's so wonderful to have friends when crisis hits. I don't know if it was the case of everyone, but during the pandemic, we were all putting 15 hours a day, working weekends. It was just because it was important for us to do. And it was so nice to have our fellow fact checkers everywhere and rely on their work. and on their work and sometimes also in their understanding of what we were going through. So I think it's important to have that kind of trust, and that kind of trust goes through standards, through knowing that the other people in the room work alongside the level that you wish for your own work to be. And then the third one, most important, when overwork, duplication is dumb. I have always said this, but it's true. We saw during the pandemic how 1 week, our friends from Chegado were doing something, debunking something in Argentina, and it would come to Spain, and 2 weeks after, you would see it everywhere. And some things like if that particular vaccine has silver in it, if Moath, who is a doctor, if I remember right, has already debunked that and give me proof that that is not the case, I am all for going with Moath's evidence and going there, right? Why? Because I know Fatabyyano is at the same standards that I work and I wish for my organization. So, I think I spoke so much that I broke this thing. No, so then, obviously, no need to put February 2022, the unthinkable happens again, and this brings us to collaboration again, and how to do this. No, now I really think I broke it. Maybe I could. At this computer? Thank you. So, the prevalent question at that time, February 2020, was, okay, let's think for a moment that before what the pandemic was for fact-checking organizations, we had knew what was coming. What could have we done differently? And I think this was something that everybody thought at that time. Like, okay, there is a giant wave coming, but now we have the experience of the pandemic, what do we do? And our message clearly from Maldita was, no. Whatever we did last time, let's do that immediately, right? Let's just start right now. Because when the Coronavirus Fact Alliance started, it started right away at the right time on January 2020. But many organizations weren't just feeling the pressure to do it right now, because in many countries, it wasn't a reality until March or April 2020. But over here, with the Russian invasion of Iraq, it was immediate, and in 48 hours, we had, I think it was like in the first 2 days, there were already 45 fact-checking organizations in 30 countries contributing to the database. It was something, I was astonished at the way we could do it. Because obviously this is a nice website, our well, maybe not so nice, but quite nice website that our team designed. But obviously there is always a database behind. That is the work of the fact-checking organizations, entering the data, which is, we need to do this, by the way, more efficiently in the future. But, it was good enough for this. And it's going to give us, the fact that that collaboration took place and is still taking place, it's going to give us so many good insights about this information about the war in Ukraine. That was very political, that was flying across borders like nothing I have seen before. Like the same things that during the pandemic would spend, you would see the same thing 1 week and next week in other country. This was a matter of days during the Ukraine invasion. And you could see, I think, many interesting, because this is super easy methodology really. What you're seeing here is just a color code of how many fact checks the fact-checking organizations in a given country had been identifying. And I think for us in Europe, many European organizations thought, okay, we will get a lot of this information because this is happening in Europe, right? But what we weren't expecting is to see that dark red in India, those large swaths of this information on Northern Africa, for example. Some people thought, well, this is not so important for the region, and it wasn't the case. And we would not know if not for collaboration between different fact-checking organizations. So I think that was pretty cool and a sign for the future. This is what the thing looked like on the other hand. I mean, if my boss could be here, she would tell you, next time the very first thing we're going to do is not to use a spreadsheet because it's quite terrible. But anyway, did it wrong. 1 minute. Okay, so 1 year, I'm just taking the first year of the database, 5K plus debunks, 100 organizations, 88 countries in the world. I come from the media sector. I have been 15 years working in national television. I have never, ever seen something like this in media. Never. And I think it will never happen. I think fact checkers are very good at this. At the anti-disinformation community is very, very good at this. So, to get, find the end of time, now that I said I used to work in television, and if you don't end on time, they cut you off. What I think, of course you can. What we learned for our most ambitious collaborative effort, Ukraine Facts, that the other side collaborates too, that the bad guys are very good at collaborating. That is a real thing. And we have a thing or two to learn from the bad guys as well. That they adapt pretty well to what happened on the field, and that image is king, because image is international, doesn't need subtitles, doesn't need a lot of text. I wanted to talk to you about this collaboration effort, but I think my time is up. Thank you. It's been great. Taiwan has been so kind to us. Thank you.
We move on to Middle East. I think if you think about political landscape in Asia Pacific, I think we are really similar to that particular region in the world. So please welcome Mo. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I think I'm the last person in the event today, so I think I need to be super interesting, especially like after Lee and Carlos. So yeah, if I catch you, so I think I can write in my CV, I can work under pressure. So, and I stand between you and evening plans. So it's a hard place to stay in. However, okay, this is Moath. I'm CEO of Fatabyyano. We are the leading fact-checking company in the MENA region. Let's just talk about Fatabyyano in words. We are the first IFCN signatory that publish in Arabic. We are third party with Meta since 2020, and we're covering 19 countries in the MENA region. And we have the first AI fact-checking tool that operate in Arabic that we will publish it actually in a few days. We publish around 1,000 fact-check per year, and we're trusted by more than 1 million users in the MENA region. And we have 10 years experience. So I will talk about these points like point by point. I will share with you 10 lessons that we have learned in the 10 years of fact-checking. Part of these lessons come from success, from failures, or from challenges. Okay, so the first thing that we learned is dream big, start little. Rome wasn't built in a day. So when we start, like the Middle East and North Africa, the area and the Arab world is very large. Like there's 450 million population, 200 million social media users, 19 countries, a lot of events and conflicts all over that happen every week, every month. So when we start in 2014 in Jordan only and we have only 1,000 followers. And it was like a big event when like we said, okay, 1,000 people now trust us. After 5 years of working, we spread to 3 countries, and we start to follow it by 500,000. In 2023, now we followed by more than 1 million users in 19 countries. I'm going to share with you some of the things that we learned by how we reach 1 million followers. The first thing that we learned that we need to respond promptly. We need to respond immediately because even in big events, like Carlos says, do it immediately. fact-checking is always urgent thing. You need to be highly responsive to people. You need to, the earliest is the better, to respond to people, to cover events, to fact-check claims. Always the earliest is the better. Even in small events for one single claim, or if you're talking about global international trend. So we usually we used to take 1 week. Now to respond to a claim, now we just need a few hours, or 3 to 4 hours. The second thing, the audiovisual content. One of the studies that analyzing actually Facebook, it take the top 500 posts have been published on Facebook with highest engagement. Was 92% of these posts are containing videos, and 7% containing images, and just 1% containing text or links. So 99% of the top 500 posts on Facebook are actually videos or images. So you need to use audiovisual content to present your fact checks. So just in 2022, we published around 50 videos, 100 infographics, and more than 500 designed photo. All of them include maybe awareness things, awareness campaign, fact checks, or articles. So here's an example of our infographics that we published, and we collaborate with many several organizations around the world. And we are talking here about collaboration. So we have several campaigns over the years by several partners about climate change, about COVID-19, about earthquake crisis, media literacy. So this is part of our organization that we collaborate with. The third thing, that know your audience. For example, we will start to work in the MENA region. We found that if there's a claim that related to Morocco, this event happened in Morocco, it's not for sure should it spread in Morocco. Sometimes it's spread in Morocco, it's related to Morocco, sorry, but the claims start to circulate in another country, but it's still in the MENA region. Here's another example. The event is in Lebanon, but the main source of the claims was in Egypt. Here's related to Turkey and Syria, but the main source of claim was in Jordan, which means you can't take just one country separately and say, okay, I'm just gonna fact check content that's the source is from this country. You need to be goal-oriented and to be open to collaboration, also open to any new things that you learned. Fourth thing, personalize the experience. For example, one of the ways that actually have been discussing how we choose the new fact checkers, because we have 19 countries and we need to cover all these places. And so how we choose fact checkers, one of the non-traditional ways that we use, every few months we publish a competition on social media and ask people to submit their responses. And the best response, usually we contact him, award him, then there's a big chance to hire him or hire her in our company. And half of our team actually have been hired in that way. It's very practical, it's very effective, and it's very transparent. If you're a good fact checker, you are welcome. So that's why we have a team distributed all over the MENA region. Actually, one of the things that building a trust, because there is a huge lack of trust between the audience in the MENA region and the news company, I believe building a trust is it's not a thing that you said, it's a thing that you build in over years and years. We have 1 million followers. We actually consider them 1 million unique source of claims. They are exceptional and invaluable source of claims, ruled by not only by providing general claims, but sometimes they support you with local claims, which could be very harmful and dangerous. But you can't reach these claims except from individuals who are living in this very small part of the country. So 1 million followers. Usually your follower is going to be your main source to fact checking or your source of claims other than the AI tools or monitoring tools that you can use. Also, not recently, like in the last few years, we published Fatabyyano Academy. We have 10 different of trainings that we teach. We teach fact checking, media information literacy, how to fact check fake websites and fake accounts, how to use AI in fact checking, and how to fact check AI content. So, 10 different courses that we give. In the last 5 years, we give a training for 800 individual benefit from our training services, but there is still a huge need. As I said, 200 million social media users, 450 million population, and the point is 60% that people in MENA region are less than 30 years old. Like people in the Middle East like having kids. So we have like more than 150,000 schools, which shows the huge need to have more and more media information literacy. We also understand something which is be agile as much as possible, like decrease the time between ideation and implementation. Don't just say, okay, we need to do that. We need to have an AI product. We need to compact misinformation. We need just start. So, for example, 90 days ago, we said, okay, we bought a 90-day challenge. Our mission to promote reliable information, to find against misinformation using 10 years of data that we collect, and to build a cutting-edge fact-checking tool in Arabic language. And now, after 90 days, we work day by day with a team of data scientists and software engineers and data experts. Now, after 90 days, we published the first Arabic fact-checking tool. It's an API that analyzes any text if it's true or false in Arabic, which is something very new. It's very challenging because usually the AI tools made or the AI models designed to support only English language. So any other language would be difficult to build AI tools for it. As we said, we learn to take the initiative. Actually, we learned this from the first day, and I just have the conversation with Angie before this session. She told me about we was discussing the media literacy and fact checking in the MENA region. I was saying the MENA region still don't know that much about fact checking and media literacy. For example, when I met the father of my wife a few years ago, he asked me, so what do you do for a living? I told him I'm a fact checker, and media information literacy. So he told me, so what do you do for a living? So, he thought I am unemployed or crazy or something. So I told him, no, I'm a doctor in medicine, okay, because I'm originally a doctor of medicine and switched to fact checking. So until now, he thinks that I am a doctor of medicine, which is I stopped practicing medicine 5 years ago. So we learned to take the initiative and start. We published the last year the first Arabic-speaking fact-checking chatbot, and it shows the huge need. When we published it, it was challenging also. We make it in partnership with Medan. The average message sent back and forth between users per day, we have around 800 messages every day, which is a big number for a new chatbot. And now we come to the idea how we publish 1,000 fact-check per year. One of the things that we learn that lack jack of trades, master of none. So when we start in 2014, we say, okay, 10 years, one goal. We have just one goal. Like in the MENA region, there is a lot of problems and things need to be to find solution for it. But we only take one problem, which is misinformation. 10 years, one goal, one thing, which is misinformation. And it's come the question, I'm now answering how we publish 1,000 fact-check. We have a preauthorized, simple but very transparent preauthorized methodology, which is like if we ask 3 questions about any claim. Is it harmful? Is it viral? Is it fact-checkable? If we have 10 claims and like 2 or 3 of them check 3 of the 3 points of this, we make it our preauthorized. We make it like the priority. And all these are, like you can track this. You can calculate if it's harmful or not. And it's appear for public when you publish the fact check. If it's viral, we shows the number of how much the claim is spreading and is it fact checkable as we support our fact checking with a piece of evidences. Also, we have a strict workflow system. I will not. I will not like explain this because like it gonna took me a day, and it's in Arabic, but it's very strict. But we have improving this methodology in the last 10 years. Every fact check we work should go in the same steps. We never skip any step. Whatever, if it's simple or whatever, it's an easy claim or it's the most serious claim ever, you need to go through these all steps. And that's we learn. Sometimes like mistakes could happen in the easiest fact checks. So each fact check go in the same steps, never skip any step. Now we publish a fact check every 8 hours. It's like we try to make it as a factory of fact checks. So we publish a fact check every 8 hours, and our next goal to publish fact check every 6 hours, then every 4 hours. So this is our goal. We use also monitoring tools like NewsWeb, CrowdTangle, TweetDeck, and other like this is most important, the 3. And that's helped us also to be on top of any trends that happen in anywhere in the 19 countries. We have bi-weekly internal meeting between the team that we discuss anything new that any one of the team learned. So we keep sharing, because like the world of AI, the fact checking and AI and media literacy, it's updated daily. So to make sure the team is on top also, and they also all in the best level they can reach, we have a bi-weekly meeting. Everyone says what is things that he learned new, what we have new things we know. We have something called Misinfo Watchers. It's something we created in 2021 during COVID. It's like they are not fact checkers. They are just Misinfo Watchers. They monitor trends, detect misinformation early, and anticipate an emergence or any coming trends. If there is any election coming, if there is any trend that we expect that will have misinformation with it, our Misinfo Watchers just collaborate with the fact checkers to give them to make sure to be on the top of any event and closely monitoring anything in the wide area that we cover. We also depend on hashtags. We have a database of hashtags and keyword for any event. So the point is to learn from anything you work on. So if we work on an election, for example, in Libya or in Egypt or any country, we keep the data that we used. What is the most common keywords had been spread? What is the most common hashtags had been used? What is the accounts had shared this misinformation or the pages? So we keep this data so we can use it and build on it on any next event. So we don't need to start from scratch on every time. So building data and it's very useful. For example, we have something that we call the story of misinformation. We study how the misinformation had been started, how it's circulated. And one of the things that how Fatabyyano expand and it is reached to a new language in MENA because of a claim. Now we publish only in Arabic. Our next goal to publish in Kurdish, which is the second language in the MENA region. We study a claim, and we found that the original of the claim was not in Arabic, even if it was very viral in Arabic, but the original claim was in another language, which is Kurdish, which is this video have around 5 million views. So we decide, okay, now we're gonna to expand to the Kurdish language. So the point is study what you fact check and build on it actions. One of the challenges that is still like ongoing challenges, I'm gonna just mention 3 of them. Here's a photo for the MENA region, and the press freedom index. You can see like the red color. It's very challenging area. So the press freedom index is very low, which is make it very challenging. Lack of public trust in a news company in the MENA region with all polarization, that's put even more challenges on us. And the last thing, the Arabic content. Like this is the total content of the word. The Arabic content is only 3%, which is also put more challenges on us that most of our sources and resources could be from another language. And that's why we need a huge collaboration with other fact checkers, because usually the sources, like the claims in Arabic, but the source or the evidence could be in another language. And that's why like hundreds of our fact checks are kind of collaboration between us and other fact checkers. Example, we have a lot of fact checks in collaboration with TFC, with Taiwan Fact Check Center, because of like the cross-border of even the misinformation. So to the end, thank you so much. I'm on the time, yeah? Yeah, great. Yeah. Thank you so much, and pleasure to be with you.
So I have many questions, and I want to start with this one. This has been sort of alluded in the morning sessions as well, but I want to dwell on it a little bit. Collaboration is very important. All of you mentioned how important it is to work with other organizations, and this afternoon, we also saw many organizations in Taiwan working in this space. Having said that, sometimes, we have too many chefs in the kitchen, don't necessarily make the food better. So I would imagine there are situations where organizations disagree. If you are collaborating to fact check during the elections, if one organization says this politician's claim is misleading, another organization say it's half true, it's very confusing for the audience. Misleading or half true? What should I do? So how do you deal with this challenge, whether internally you have some disagreement? How do you deal with this?
So before, like in Spain, there are, I think, 4 IFCN signatories, so 4 full-fledged fact checkers. When we collaborate for elections, we had to adapt for our project, for example, consistent ways of rating these things. So maybe in the optimism of my presentation, I took out the fact that this takes a lot of effort, and even for the Ukraine Facts database, if you remember, it's hard to some people understand claims in a way, in other, when the data is not consistent, that the one that is inputted in the database, you need to talk to people and tell them, no, we are not understanding each other. This is the way to go. So it takes an agreement. But I think on the nature, like you were saying, like fundamental disagreements about this information, there hasn't been so many during these collaborative projects. Like generally, regardless of the, there might be something between this is outright false or is just severely misleading, but it is rare that one could say, no, this is false. And one would say, no, I see no problem with this. You know this, that normally in our line of work, the judgments made on content are very strict and tend to be almost mathematical. So no, in that sense, I think it takes a lot of work to work together. But I don't think huge disagreements are there, because if there are, then someone is very much wrong, and that should be approached in a different way. But I don't think that's been the case.
Thanks, Prof. I probably would beg to differ. There are too many chefs when it comes to the kitchen of misinformation. I think we don't have enough fact checkers, right? But I think key and Carlos is very accurate in terms of you have to have that base, that foundation that we are all going to agree on the minimum standards around a collaboration project. We've just come from one such project in Nigeria where we were various fact-checking organizations, and I think what helped was clearly mapping out the roles of each, right? If you're Africa Check, you are going to take the lead on resources. If you are Organization Q, you're going to take the lead on, doing the actual, say, call-ups. There's just a role for everyone in that collaboration, right? Then probably reduces the opportunities for too many interpretations of what the outcome is. And I agree again with Carlos, if there is a lot of debate around a verdict, then probably one is somebody is wrong, is inaccurate, right? So, but I think mapping out the roles in any collaboration really reduces those opportunities for just that kind of, Tower of Babylon kind of situation, right? But I think again, it's a very useful initiative to, take the case of Nigeria. You have 220 million people, and imagine all the various communities, all the various languages, and then you are probably 5-6 fact-checking organizations. You're not even scratching the surface in any way, right? So I think probably map out what each organization's key strength is going to be. Obviously, you all have a base minimum of standards, but then from there, take it forward in terms of let's hit the ground running once you've agreed who's doing what.
I think Lee and Carlos covered it very well. But the point here is we talk about kind of collaboration. One of the most important or most interesting things that we have currently, for example, if I want a fact checker in Taiwan, which is most people in the Middle East have never heard or never know anyone in Taiwan. We know 10 fact checkers at least in Taiwan. And this is very recent. It's something not like we used to. If we want fact checkers in Spain, in Italy, in Brazil, we just we know tens of fact checkers there, which is make the collaboration now easier and easier. And I think with the time is going, the collaboration is increasing between fact checkers inside the country and globally. And I agree with what Carlos and Lee had been said.
Respond to any of? Okay. I was told that there's going to be a Q&A session after this panel. So we get the questions from the audience at the time, or should we take the questions now? Or?
If anyone have a question, you can also raise your hand.
If you raise your hand, then maybe
we would be happy.
Yeah, desk has a microphone as well. So, I think one big advantage of working with other organizations is the scale. Suddenly, you're a small group and you work with different organizations and your scale's much bigger, you have much bigger audience, you have wider scope from 1,000 users to 1 million in a few years is amazing. What is the growing pain? If you could go back in time with the time machine and do things differently, what would that be? And why would you do it differently? What lessons have you learned?
That's a good question.
I do have one. When we started, I think like many people in the field, we were very much focused on politics, and that seemed very relevant because, lie in politicians should have an extra, price. But I think by focusing on politics, we might have overlooked a little bit other instances of disinformation that were crucial, while at the same time we were, without knowing, alienating a big part of society that, truth to be told, doesn't care much about politics. They might be on election day from time to time, but the day-to-day disinformation that they suffer and that they care about is rarely politics. So I think it took us a few years to understand that the right way to go was to open our ears and to let people ask the questions like, what do they care about? And when we opened those tip lines and we were super active on WhatsApp, which is where, like, I said this is going from Twitter to WhatsApp. So Twitter is full of politicians, journalists, and academics, and in Spain they have around 3 million accounts. WhatsApp, it's everywhere, everyone from my grandmother to my child soon enough, and it has 40 million accounts. And yet, the conversation is always around what happens on Twitter. So I think if I had to say, I think I would have turned the wheel that we did decisively, but probably from the very beginning, like saying, you know, this information is broader than this. It's about scams, like some organizations said. It's about many different things beyond political fact-checking.
Yeah, I think if I had to go back in time, teleport myself back, I think the more important thing is to understand that collaborations are not events, right? I wish we built that infrastructure in between, the need for collaboration. Let me take the examples of elections. You know, there will be an election anytime in any country, right? So most of the work that is done around fact-checking happens in between the elections. That's when you build your infrastructure. That's when you speak to the people who matter. That's when, you understand what kind of misinformation you're going to encounter, right? So that when it comes to the time to be in the kitchen, in the boiler room, then, you are not struggling too much to understand the context, right? So I wish we would invest in that infrastructure, understand that, the work happens well before you get into the kitchen, right? And it's something we see, for example, with a lot of journalism outlets on the continent. They want to parachute in during an election, for example, right? But then most of the work really in understanding the nature, the context, what is going to inform the issues in that election will have happened in between that election, right? Of course, there's some events that you cannot anticipate, pandemic, Ukraine, but again, the infrastructure is the same. You've built that network of collaborating with organizations because you've been working together around the clock and not just when there is something that needs to be collaborated on.
That's incredible. Maybe a few things that we would make it differently. The first thing and the most important thing, we would join IFCN more earlier. Like okay. We published in 2014. I think IFCN published in 2015, but we only joined in 2018 or 2019, between like the late of 2018. And the point that we don't know about IFCN except that date, which is like a part of, like, we wasn't open to international fact checkers. We thought, like, we have never tried to reach new fact checkers globally. So that the things that, because when we enter the IFCN, that changed everything. That's opened a lot of doors for us. So we will not do the things we will do it better. Also, one of the things that we will work remotely from the first day.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
We start working remotely during COVID-19, and during COVID we found, like, it's better, it's cheaper, it's costly effective, it's easier, and it's more efficient. And so after COVID, we're still working remotely. And one of the things, for example, now, as we cover the MENA region, our headquarters are in Jordan. So our team was only in Jordan. So we need to choose, like, the best fact checkers between 8 million. And now we can, as we are working remotely, we can choose, like, the best team in between 450 million. So we now have more options. So we will have a better fact checkers, and you will have more diversity. And now if I hope not, but if any pandemic happen, nothing will change on us. Like, we are ready. So working remotely, like, I think we will the things that we will change.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. And
All right. Yes.
Yes, and this panel is Yeah, this panel is done, and let's have a big clap to all the speakers. And in the following few minutes, we will have a Q&A question. So please just have the seat on the stage, and we will get the questions from our audience, and to see if any speakers can answer the questions. OK， 好，那接下来的20分钟，我们会接受大家今天听了一整天，然后心里面想的问题，所以就没有局限在哪一个专题里面。那你可以用中文，也可以用英文来问问题。那我们会协助。那要请所有的国外讲者帮我带 mic， 然后来可以听我们的翻译。好，那好，那延续刚刚在讲跨界合作，那有一个问题哦，就是可能是学者这边来问的，他问的是事实查核的跨界合作很重要，目前已经有非常多个协作的案例，那这样子的资料，除了给事实查核组织之间使用之外，是不是有可能开放给研究单位进行资料的研究？
Yeah, should go. That's interesting question. And as Carlos mentioned in his speech, a lot of misinformation are like not just fact-checking is cross-border, but also misinformation is a cross-border. For example, there's a misinformation could start in Taiwan. After like a few days, it could be in Ukraine. After like 5 days, and now it's MENA region. Then it's in US or so. It's the misinformation is also translated and it's a cross-border. So that's why fact-checking should be cross-border. It's not an option. It's something we need to do. So a lot of examples that we have, not just like for fact-checking, you have a lot examples how we can collaborate on single fact-check, but there is a lot of examples of how a misinformation could start in one language, and if it had not been fact-checked earlier, it could be like go out of control and translated to hundreds of languages or become an international misinformation. So if there is a good collaboration between fact-checkers and a claim start in like several countries and it had been fact-checked and debunked as early as possible, we could also prevent the harm of this misinformation or disinformation to spread to other countries. So here's, I think, the importance of cross-border fact-checking.
I was going to add, like the question mentioned fact-checkers explicitly, and this should go on our self-criticism. I think as a community, we need to do much better for researchers and make sure our evidence is more available. So my organization, we try to collaborate with some researchers and give them access to our data, but it's true that the process of codifying and recodifying data is a very, it's very labor intensive. You don't always have the resources. It's not easy always to find a third party that can help you to do that. But I really think that in our data, the data our organizations produce, it is really a trove. It is very precious, and under the right eyes from a researcher, we could get so many insights about how to do our work better, but how this information works and how foreign interference is changing our lives. And I think we need to do a better job of making sure that happens, because I think there is room to improvement.
But on the other hand, I think we had this discussion in Oslo last year actually about the data protection. When you have a massive database like Ukraine Facts Alliance with tens of thousands of rows of spreadsheet, the question is who should we share that with? And if there are requests coming from all over the world, how would we then make sure that this particular request doesn't come from bad actors? Because obviously there are less state actors who are involved in this field as well. And I think it's kind of hard to actually vet which researcher to share the data with and which researchers to say no. So it's really it's difficult practically.
I could say it's probably quite impossible to do that. We can nitpick academics that we trust, but generally we should be able to refer to a larger framework. Like in Europe, I know the European Digital Media Observatory, which is the disinformation observatory, is working on a process to vet researchers. And I think in the global scale, there should be something like that, because it's generally impossible, as you say, for fact checkers, on top of what all the fact checking we do, that we have to fact check that researchers are real researchers. That would be too hard. But we need to find probably some institution that we trust that can give us a leg on that side.
Yeah.
好，那下一个问题哦，就是有提到刚刚就是 Carlos 有介绍，在乌俄战争期间，全球查核组织共同的协作非常的成功。那从这个事件来看，未来全球发生重大的事件的时候，那全球查核组织还有这个生态系要怎么做？有没有什么可以精进的地方？那今天除了 Carlos 介绍的乌俄战争事实联盟之外，其实新冠肺炎事实联盟也在武汉封城的那一天起就开始运作了。那发起这个运作的就是台湾事实查核中心跟 IFCN 的前任副总监 Christina， 我们共同发起了这个全球的协作。那当时协作的经验，也让大家在接收到 Carlos 的这个试算表的时候，所有的人都知道要怎么做，所以这个经验很快的就运用在乌俄战争的查核上。那从这两个经验我们来看，未来我们不希望有什么事件发生，但发生的时候，查核组织我们如何做得更好
？I think that one thing we can be sure is that things will happen. then we gotta be prepared, and that's what I would go with. If I were a fact-checking organization anywhere, I would try to make sure I am an IFCN signatory, or I'm a part of a regional organization that I trust, that I am already part of a network. Because as I was saying before, the key lesson is probably that when crisis hits, we are all way too busy, way too overworked to develop these things from zero. How we could do Coronavirus Fact Alliance or Ukraine Facts is that we all knew each other, our organizations. I didn't need to know that Africa Check was a thing. I already knew, and I trusted them, and I knew they operated in the same standards, so I have complete confidence in taking the investigation they do and use it for my purposes, because I know they have these standards. So for me, that would be the key lesson going into the future, that regardless, I think there are giant waves of disinformation that we all see coming, and at that time, we could do a better work technically, but the most important thing is that solid basic infrastructure of knowing each other is there. So I think, I don't want to be mistaken, but I do think when the next big hit comes, we will be better prepared. Because in Ukraine, we were better prepared than in the Coronavirus Fact Alliance. And in the Coronavirus Fact Alliance, we were better prepared than before IFCN ever existed, and we were all doing the war on our own.
好，那也有观众提问 ，IFCN 是不是能够提供给查核单位各国查核组织的联系方式，或者有没有窗口联系的列表？那所以在不实讯息流通的状况之下，比较方便来跟这些 IFCN 的成员组织能够来做查证，得到查证的协助。I think the question is for Angie.
The IFCN relies on its signatories in the different countries to be points of contact with the fact-checking community. So Taiwan Fact-Checking Center would be the contact in Taiwan. We are, and that's basically how we connect. We have some regional networks that do organize things locally. The IFCN has a robust listserv where we, for the signatories, where we talk to each other when events are happening, and then we rapidly convene Zoom meetings. But I should note the IFCN as a network is what I would call a lightweight organization. We have a small team, and we do that because we don't want to build a huge infrastructure. We want to make sure that the resources that we're able to get, particularly grants, we redistribute to our members. So I don't anticipate the network getting a big, a global size staff. We're going to be small staff and try to empower our signatories in the different countries.
Thank you. 那下一个问题是给问非洲还有中东地区的查核工作。那非洲跟中东地区都有非常多的国家，还有不同的文化。那在推动查核的时候，会不会遇到不同国家的文化差异？那这个差异又怎么样能够克服呢？
Thank you. Actually, this could be pros and cons at the same time. One of the things that make it's 19 countries, but we work only in Arabic language, and all the 19 countries speak Arabic language. Maybe there is 19 different accents, but the written language is the same. So if we write a fact check in Arabic, you reach the 450 million in one shot, which is make it easier and easier to reach the whole region. Also, for example, if we publish a chatbot, which is in Arabic, we can reach the whole population in one chatbot. You don't need to put a lot of accents because it's written. So, like for example, you have in English there is a British, there is a Scottish, there is Irish, there is American accent, but when you write it, it's the same. And the same thing is with Arabic. So there is a difference in culture, but this is like we believe it's an opportunity, not a challenge. And as I said, it's one language which make it a lot easier when you publish fact check, when you publish a tool, when you publish a product. So, yeah. Thank
you. Culture really plays a big role in the interventions and initiatives you're going to take. And that's something we've learned a lot from the many countries we have on the continent, 55. There are countries where religion, for example, really is a big factor nationally, right? How are you going to approach, say, misinformation that is grounded or seeded by religious leaders, right? There are others where African traditional societies, the respect for that remains a big thing, at a national level. You have traditional leaders who are revered. How are you going to tackle disinformation that is seeded by this, right? It really does help one, be on the ground to understand what are the factors in play, but also for you to decide this is the approach I'm going to take in a particular country, right? And that's why one collaboration also does help, because you lean on the expertise of the country fact checkers, for example, you're working with. But you also discover a lot of things. For example, I think even if you're doing, for example, a collaboration, say, around Ukraine, right? Then you discover maybe in Africa there's a lot of historical factors that make it's difficult for countries to say outrightly Russia is the problem, right? For example, and then you look at the historical, you see there were non-aligned movements. There are some countries where a lot of support for Russia is, and I think someone showed a very useful chart here, which just showed how much perception is about the protagonists in the conflict. So just understanding the different historical factors, the cultural factors in a country really is a huge part of what we do in terms of collaboration. So it does play a huge role, in what you decide to do in terms of countering specific types of false information.
好，那接下来的问题会再回到 NG， 就是独裁政体对资讯的交流通常会采取控制的手段。 那对跨国事实查核组织的合作形成非常大的挑战。那 IFCN 是不是有比较好的对策来突破这样子的集权政治的干预呢？
Hello. I think that is a very challenging question. I'm not sure that the IFCN has the influence to overcome authoritarian regimes around the world. I wish that we did. Our strategy currently, though, is to look to empower fact checkers around the world, even in very challenging circumstances. We have seen some success with fact-checking groups working outside of borders. So there is a long-time fact-checker of the country of Iran that operates from Toronto, and there are other examples in the network of kind of fact-checking in exile. I think that is currently our strongest strategy that accounts for the safety of the fact checkers and the ability to fact check with integrity. One of the challenges of fact checking authoritarian regimes is that they are not willing to have the freedom of expression and freedom of knowledge seeking that is required for a fact checking effort. So again, we do try to support fact checkers even when they are not able to operate within the countries that they are fact checking.
好 ，Thank you very much。好，那其他的问题哦，我想我们可以留到明天。那明天我们的 panel 都跟今天的问题有关，一个是谈到两岸，那另外也谈到事实查核中心要怎么样来打2024年的选战。那这些问题我们可以留到明天来做回答。然后，我们今天先帮所有人，包括讲者，还有包括我们自己，就是大力的鼓掌。好。谢谢各位讲者这么用心的分享自己的经验还有见解，那也非常谢谢今天做了一整天共同的来参与，大家眼中的就是渴望知识的眼神，我想就是讲者今天能够做一整天，我们已经在首尔开了3天的会议，那所有的讲者都飞了很长的旅程来到了亚洲，然后今天呢，还跟我们从早上一路的做到现在，所以我们在特别鼓掌，谢谢讲者们。